Good evening, and welcome to Community Social Justice Atlanta. I am your host for this evening, Minister Eva McMillan, and we have an exciting lineup for you tonight. If you have been viewing with us for the last year or so, you know that we like to bring you information about what is currently going on in our community and the things that affect us, the things that affect our children, our families, and our businesses. And so tonight is no exception. I want you to go ahead and share this link and invite others to come in so that we can all gather and get together and garner some information that would help us in our future. We are talking to two of the most political people here in the state of Georgia. And we want to find out tonight what the future of Georgia politics is going to look like. If you have been following anything, you know that the landscape for Georgia has changed. And that landscape helps to shape our political future. And so it is very important. Go ahead and share this link. Get people to tune in. If you have questions, put the question in the text so that our producer can let us know, and hopefully we'll be able to get an answer for you. But go ahead and share this. We have been talking about the COVID-19. We've been talking about politics. We've been talking about racism. We've been talking about are our schools ready? And tonight we're going to be talking more about politics. So go ahead and share this. Again, this is Community Social Justice Atlanta. We are a bipartisan group. We do not have an agenda other than bringing you good, informative information that we have vetted through people that we trust and we rely on, first of all, to be truthful and to be those that have integrity. And so tonight is no exception. Politics in Georgia is changing. The future of politics is changing, and it is going to have an effect on everyone. So tonight, I want to bring on our first guest. She is no stranger to Community Social Justice Atlanta. Would you help me welcome Ms. Sarah? Hello, Sarah. How are you?
I'm well, Minister. It's so good to be back. I really appreciate everything Community Social Justice does, and I enjoy the conversation every time I'm here.
We are so excited that you're here. We are so excited for you to be sharing because we know that you have some information. And stay tuned, share this link because she's going to be telling us about some initiatives that she's working with at near the end of the segment. So go ahead and share this and invite others to come on. You guys know Sarah, you know she is all about community. You know she is a truthful person and she will tell you like it is. And so we're so excited about her being here tonight. And we're going to have another guest to come in at this point. He is new to Community Social Justice Atlanta, but he is not new to the Atlanta community. Would you please help me welcome Representative Billy Mitchell?
Good to be with you, Minister Eva, and I tell you, it is a singular honor and pleasure to be with Sarah Riggs Amico, a valiant public servant, and I think this elevates my profile indeed. People will view this and think that I am someone being on this panel with her. Glad to be with you and your audience.
Thank you guys so much. Sarah shared something earlier with us about Mr. Mitchell, Representative Mitchell. Would you share that again so that our audience would know the connection?
Yeah, absolutely. Many of y'all know, and we've talked about it on this program a couple of times, but in 2018, I had the chance to run for office for the very first time. I really didn't know much about how the political and electoral process as a candidate worked. As you mentioned, Minister, I'm a lifelong policy nerd, but I didn't know a lot of folks. And the very first state representative who gave me a chance, lent me an ear, and most importantly, gave me an endorsement when I ran for lieutenant governor alongside Stacey Abrams in 2018 was Representative Billy Mitchell. So he's my favorite. I love many, many people in our elected officials here in Georgia, but I will always think of Billy as the guy who was willing to listen to the new girl who had big ideas, but was totally the new kid on the block.
Now, how many years have you been involved in politics, Sarah?
It's funny. I was trying to articulate this the other day. I was the kind of kid that in high school, I was on the Constitution team, right? Like, I've done this since I was old enough to talk. I understood what a president was and an election was for the first time when I was 6 years old, but I've really studied American government in earnest since I was 12. So we're going on 30 years now of following. This was my undergraduate work, was in political science and public policy. And my graduate work was an MBA business school, but I focused on the intersection of business, government, and the international economy.
Wow. Now, Representative Mitchell, how long have you been in politics, and how did you get into politics?
Hey, I'm almost embarrassed to say. I will tell you that I probably was in what you would call politics probably not too long after I learned how to walk. I had a mother who at the time, I was born in Georgia, moved into New Jersey of all places, and my mother was elevated all the way up to chief of the sheriff's department there, and her appointee, the appointer, was a elected official, and so we were holding signs and getting involved since those days. But prior to me being in the legislature, I was on my local city council in Stone Mountain, Georgia, and was encouraged to run for city council and then for the state legislature. And this is next year, I'll be completing my 20th year in the state legislature.
Wow, congratulations.
Wow.
That is an accomplishment. So let's get right to it. Let's talk about the future of Georgia politics. I see that the census report is coming out at the end of September, I believe September 30th. And I realized that based on the information that the census is going to provide, it is really going to kind of reshape some of where our resources will go, even the number of seats that would be garnered by the different districts. I also learned that because of that, or in addition to that, that there are already began to do remapping. And, I'm really just trying to figure out what is going on and how this is going to affect my community. I've often heard about gerrymandering, but this looks a little different in what they're trying to do. So I'm going to start with you, Sarah. Give me your take on it, and then we're going to shift it over to Mr. Mitchell to bring us to what they're saying in the House.
Yeah, I mean, all eyes are going to be on y'all, Billy. No pressure, right? But everything's up for grabs, right? So every 10 years we have the census. In fact, we talked about it on this program, how important it was, not just in terms of federal funding available to Georgians, but redrawing the maps. And so in this case, Georgia is not picking up a congressional seat. Sometimes in reapportionment, states win or lose an additional seat as their population grows or shrink. But we'll stay steady there. But if I'm not mistaken, and Representative Mitchell will tell you this in much more detail, I'm sure, but at the beginning of November, the legislature will be called back into a special session to literally redraw the maps. And it's going to be interesting because what the census showed us is that Georgia's changing. And most of us who've traveled around the state know that. But this is a state that probably at this point, given when census data was collected, is a majority minority state. And that means the landscape here is changing. It also means that our representation at every single level of government should reflect that. But we all know that it doesn't. And so I think there's going to be some horse trading. The Democrats winning both of the U.S. Senate runoffs on January 5th, and certainly the Biden-Harris ticket win here last November, delivering 16 electoral votes for the president and his vice president. That changes the landscape, right? So a lot of what, for example, the Georgia GOP has probably taken for granted for the better part of 2 decades has changed. The landscape has changed, and now it'll be up to Billy and his colleagues in the House and then, of course, the state Senate to determine what those districts look like and how we're represented in the state legislature going forward.
Like she said, no pressure on you, Representative Fish. No pressure at all.
Well, I will tell you, this is a perfect example where I can tell you that elections have consequences,
Yes.
whereas each voter getting to the polls and voting, that it can certainly make a difference. In Georgia, and as it is the case with the overwhelming majority of states, the majority party, the party that is in control, gets to essentially draw the maps. Now, those of us that are in the minority party, we certainly can influence that process. We certainly can try to negotiate here or there. But in a state like Georgia, where the majority party gets that opportunity to do so, they're going to try to preserve their majority. By the last election results, as Sarah mentioned, Georgia is about a 50-50 state for sure. However, the maps that will be drawn will not reflect that. If they get too outside of the norm, certainly there's almost certainly going to be some court cases that are derived as a result of this. But there again, I'm concerned because the Supreme Court just recently stated that they're not going to get involved in reapportionment issues or redistricting the map. So we could see some terrible gerrymandering, as you said. You know, it used to be in this country, and certainly in many states, particularly in the South, they had to get their maps pre-cleared, or any election law changes pre-cleared by the Justice Department. Well, the courts threw that out a few years ago. Yes. And with the Supreme Court sending signals that they're not going to intervene, we could see some very, very interesting maps drawn. However, we still have the Civil Rights Act. We still have demographics on our side. Since 2010, over 1 million new people moved to the state of Georgia. Here's an interesting stat that I found staggering. In Minister Eva, we got this census data actually not too long ago, a week or two ago, and we're going to have a session, as Sarah mentioned, in November to draw the maps. But here's an interesting stat. If you are a Black person in this country and you are moving to another state, the state you are most likely to be moving to than any other state is Georgia. Yes. So the demographics are changing rapidly. I don't see how they're going to be able to protect as many members in the Congress and in the state Senate and the state House of Representatives as they are traditionally have done. So it should be an interesting time.
Yes, I remember I'm a transplant here. I've been here since '74. And I remember that there was a term that people were using when I got here in '74, that this was the Black Mecca. That if there was opportunities to be had, it was to be had here within the metro Atlanta areas, and especially being of Dr. Martin Luther King. So yes, I did see that information where we have grown by 1 million within the last 10 years, and that because of that growth, that I saw where although people of color are slightly under as far as population in the state of Georgia, but it is increasingly getting to neck. And because of that, it has a party scared, and it has the party trying to do everything in order to maintain that level of power. And in knowing that, what can we as individual citizens do? What is our best defense to help you?
Yeah, I would say talking about these issues with your elected officials. So one of the things to know is when the census data was collected, we were just under 50% people of color in the state of Georgia. It is almost certain that we've crossed the threshold into that majority minority state now. So I think it's really important to talk about gerrymandering. It's really important to talk about dark money. Billy can tell you probably a lot about the struggles they have in the session this year. where the GOP majority in our state effectively passed an exemption for the governor, lieutenant governor to create, the speaker as well, if I'm not mistaken, to create leadership committees that have unlimited, possibly dark money, meaning that we don't know who put that money in, as much as they want to help support their candidates in elections. And they can actually do that while they're in session, which they really haven't been able to do in I think, a couple of decades, if I'm not mistaken, Billy. But they can now, for example, if you're in an industry that's pushing for something during the session, the governor's leadership committee could receive virtually unlimited money from a nonprofit sponsored by that industry in an attempt to influence the legislation. So I think you've got to pair the conversation about gerrymandering with the conversation about campaign finance reform and the conversation about voting rights. Billy mentioned the gutting of the Voting Rights Act, and we saw H.R. 4, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, the restoration of the VRA, passed this week in the U.S. House. We need the Senate to take up that torch now. We need them to pass this legislation and restore voting rights. And it's not just pre-clearance, which again was the way that we prevented harm from traditionally marginalized voters, specifically in minority communities, in Black communities in the South. We not only need that fixed, but the Supreme Court decisions earlier this year also took a real hatchet to Section 2, talking about what the reach of Section 2 really can be in determining when those populations have been harmed. So I would look at it like a three-legged stool. You've got to talk voting rights, passing the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, the For the People Act. You've got to talk gerrymandering, making sure we have fair representation in our districts, and talking about that dark money that comes in and means regular folks feel like they don't have a voice compared to these corporations that can put millions of dollars of money in without ever having to tell anybody they're doing it. That's the way I would look at it. But Billy, you may have a totally different perspective from the inside of the sausage making process.
Well, I will tell you, Minister Eva, as you can see, this is why I love Sarah Riggs Amico and why it was so easy to embrace her and her candidacy, because she's absolutely right. And the reality is the laws that they are creating is a hindrance to voting. It is, as a matter of fact, that they are choosing their voters rather than the voters choosing their elected officials. They don't wish to have competitive elections. I will tell you what we need to do. One of the things we need to do is we need to get on the phone and we need to contact our U.S. senators. We're fortunate in Georgia that we have some of the best, but particularly some of the other states, we need to get on the phone. We need to stay engaged. We need to stay informed. We need to stay involved in this process. And that's why I'm grateful for programs like this to really inform our viewers, inform voters, so that they can stay engaged in the process. I will tell you this, Mr. Eva, that every now and then as elected officials, we hear the notion that how come that community over there seems to get everything that they want, or most of it, and this community over here seems to be neglected. Now, I can give you all kinds of social theorems and reasons why that may be, but the reality is the community that is better served is more informed and engaged. If we could miraculously pick up all the people from the underserved area and place them in the well-served area, and pick up all the people from the well-served area and put them in the underserved area, guess what would happen virtually overnight? The services would flip, simply being that those who are accustomed to being uninformed and uninvolved will continue to do so. And those who are accustomed to being involved and informed would also continue to do so. So what should we do? We need to be informed and involved so that we can influence the process as those who designed our form of government intended it to be, not a spectator sport.
I'd also say vote with your dollars, by the way. Sorry, just to add on what Billy is saying. We've seen this year, and many of you know I've worked in the business world for over 18 years as an executive, And we've never seen an environment like this before, where consumers are really putting pressure on companies to speak up for voting rights. And I've got to say, I'm here for it. I'm all for it. And I encourage you, vote with your dollars. If there's a company that's supporting candidates who are supporting the big lie, the overthrow of free and fair elections, the limiting of voting rights, but for particularly here in the South, in communities of color, in poor communities, in rural communities, they don't need your dollar. They don't need your business. Take it to the next guy down the road, because that is the ultimate way that we engage some of these big companies to ensure that they're not funneling money to people who are chipping away at our democracy.
You know, one of the things that we saw during the election, this previous election, is that it was fueled by a lot of racial tension, especially with the killing of George Floyd, you know, and Breonna Taylor. There were so many anomalies that went on that was, you know, these horrific things that caused people to get out and vote. So I would hate to think that that is the only motivating catalyst. So I like what you said about the money. Basically, you know, hold people accountable, hold these corporations accountable, that they will help to protect the vote. Now, one of the things that happened in July is that there was a meeting that I read that you attended, Representative Mitchell. Can you talk about that meeting in July where you went to it was a hearing, I believe it was. Can you tell us what went on and some of the results of that?
Okay, certainly. You know, in addition to being a state representative in Georgia, I also chair the Democratic caucus in the House of Representatives, and I also am president of the National Black Caucus of State Legislators. This is the organization that represents the interests of all the African American legislators nationwide. I will tell you that almost 40% of the Congressional Black Caucus are former members of NBCSL, as was the 44th president. He was an active member of my organization that I'm now president of. And I tell folk all the time, had I known that he would turn out to be the Barack Obama, I would strive to build a better relationship with him at the time. But as a result of that, and doing some work nationally, the U.S. Senate committee did a rare visit outside of the Capitol, and Georgia was their first stop. And as your viewers know, Georgia is ground zero for voter suppression. Yes. And as a result, they called myself in, as well as another legislators, as well as 2 or 3 other community folk who were impacted by the draconian legislation that was put into place. I will tell you, during the debate in the House, I was the last person to speak to the bill as the chair. And how I closed was, you know, the 4 most important words in a democracy are the people have spoken. Mm-hmm. And so what we should be doing is trying everything that we can to allow the people to vote, to speak, not suppress their ability to speak.
Wow. So I understood, or I read, I think that there were no Republican representatives there?
That is correct. They were invited, but none chose to attend, and which is sad. You know, I think that we all grow from a good debate, and if you have a position, you should be able to defend that position. I always say, if your policies can't withstand the scrutiny of analysis and questioning and debate, then they shouldn't be law in the first place.
I saw a video where you were interviewed, and one of the things you said is that no one showed up to defend, I think it was 202.
202, that is correct.
And I thought that was quite interesting that, you know, most people, the only thing that you really have to stand by is your word.
Yeah.
And
I would
go ahead.
I will tell you this. They do not wish to have the scrutiny of analysis, particularly in front of, I think, every media outlet in the nation was there, because it's indefensible. We talk about, for instance, not being able to give water online. And the reality is the law itself is much more egregious than that. The law, to quote it exactly, says that you can't offer anything of value if you're online 150 feet from the poles. Anything it can't even offer. So, for instance, as I mentioned to my colleagues in the chamber as they went silent on this, you come to the polls with your spouse and you say to your spouse, darling, would you like a piece of chewing gum? That person is then subject to arrest, $1,000 fine, and up to a year in jail. Wow. Offline, they will tell you, yes, that bill is ridiculous. It would be enforced unevenly. It certainly is something that can't be enforceable. So I suspect that the courts will eventually throw that out, as with some of the other provisions as well.
So now you said that the one of the hindrances to basically fair mapping was that the Supreme Court basically has pulled out. What can we expect from the federal level?
I tell you, we're in some very interesting times, because I am hoping the U.S. Senate has a procedure which is called the ability to filibuster. Essentially, you need 10 Republicans to join the Democrats to overcome the filibuster, or they could pass a rule that would not require them to have a filibuster, and it would be a simple majority. I say they should go with a simple majority to pass this bill, and let's move on. The filibuster is a relatively new phenomenon, not something that was created by those who designed our laws and our Constitution. So I say we should forego the filibuster rule so that we can make certain that the rules are fair. That's all we're asking for. We're not asking for an advantage. We're asking, let's make it fair. And hopefully they will come around. It's one of the reasons why I said your viewers, particularly those who are outside of Georgia, will call their U.S. senator and demand that they get this bill passed.
I heard that term filibuster used a lot. I also heard where our current president is actually in favor of it. I think I heard that.
Yeah, so it's, a lot of people think of filibuster as, when Nancy Pelosi stood in 4-inch heels and spoke for 8 hours, right? Or when Ted Cruz inexplicably read Green Eggs and Ham in the well of the Senate, right? But that's not actually what we're talking about here. So the filibuster is literally just to put this on the floor of the U.S. Senate for consideration. So it's not even a vote. It's a vote to advance debate and discussion. So what I think is really striking about some of the Republicans in the U.S. Senate right now is it's not just that they won't support restoring the Voting Rights Act, they won't even support talking about it, which is, again, to Billy's point earlier, anybody who has the courage of their convictions and believes in their policies that they support, it shouldn't be afraid of somebody disagreeing with them. In fact, you should be excited to have that discussion where your logic will obviously prevail, right? So the filibuster has actually been pared down twice already. We saw this when Barack Obama was president to advance certain judicial nominees, and we saw it to advance appointees that are confirmed by the Senate for things like ambassadorships or government, different bureaucracies in the government. So this would actually be the third and final piece of the filibuster that would be kind of taken away. There is talk of a carve-out at the U.S. Senate, which I think is really interesting. Joe Manchin, senator from West Virginia, who's sort of one of two key moderates, him and Kirsten Sinema from Arizona, kind of the two moderates that perennially stop a much more progressive approach from the 50 Democratic senators in the U.S. Senate. He's indicated that he's open to carving out voting rights from the filibuster rule. So the filibuster itself, this final third layer of it, how we get stuff on the floor to vote, might actually remain intact for everything except this or similar civil and constitutional right issues, right? That at least could get us across the finish line. I'm not sure overall whether President Biden will ultimately come around that the filibuster is just preventing too much progress on too many issues and that it needs to go entirely. But the carve out for voting rights or civil rights seems to be a reasonable path forward. And I expect you'll hear a lot more debate about that at the federal level in the coming months.
Okay. I've often wanted to ask someone this. We have two words that have been polarized within the political community. I'm a conservative. I'm a liberal. What does that mean to both of you?
Yeah, what does that mean to you, Sarah?
Yeah, I'm laughing because Billy knows this. I'm not a lifelong Democrat. I'm very open about talking about that. I'd like to believe I'm Matthew chapter 25 Christian, so meeting the tangible needs of others. And it was actually Barack Obama who made me a Democrat, who his pursuit specifically of healthcare legislation. I just don't believe people should be sick because they're poor or poor because they got sick. And so for me, I giggle at the labels because there are not a lot of my policy positions since I was 13 years old that have changed. I have been pro-reproductive autonomy. I have been very pro-labor union. I have been militantly pro-universal health care for a very long time. And yet I grew up in the Ozarks in a small conservative community. The only Democrats I really knew were my grandmothers, and believe me, they have never let me live it down that I eventually came onto the right team. But I don't think those labels mean much anymore. And in fact, I would argue, and it may not be a popular opinion, I took a lot of grief from Democrats by switching parties, even though it was over a decade ago, or almost a decade ago, I guess. But for me, my values are not fungible. Political affiliation is much more fluid, right? If our party ran a candidate like a Donald Trump or a Roy Moore, I would absolutely be looking to see if there were better people who mirrored my values. And I think part of the problem right now is that we've receded into these echo chambers where people kind of dig in their heels and they're not willing to hear. It's almost like we've shamed each other into different corners and we've destroyed the bridge between them. And I wish, look, I want to be clear. I don't want anybody to water down their values or their policies. I certainly am not going to give up the fight for something like universal health care. But I do wish we talked to each other. I wish that we discarded those labels and said, look, I don't believe people should be sick because they are poor. Do you believe that? And that we started the conversation there. Because right now we've shamed each other into these corners where even something as simple as like getting vaccinated or wearing a mask to protect people like my kids who are too young to be vaccinated. You know, I live in Cobb County. What's going on in our school system here is a tragedy. And somebody is going to end up paying with their life. And it is a preventable human life lost, a preventable loss of life, a preventable tragedy. And it's all over this politics. So the labels to me don't mean much. I think we know what's in our hearts. We know what we believe is right. We know how to treat each other, especially folks that, you know, in the church community, we know. Yeah. And you should follow that. And the minute your spidey sense says something's not right here, like this person's not truthful, they're not genuine, they're not authentic, listen to that voice. That's much more important as a compass, I think, than labels like liberal or conservative. Because I've probably been a very progressive person since I was 13 years old, and I spent, solid, almost a decade thinking I was a Republican. I don't know why. Maybe one day I'll understand it, but I don't think the labels mean much. I think we need to get back to what do we value and what kind of world and community do we want to live in and leave for our kids.
Hear, hear.
You have anything to echo on that?
I think she capsulized it perfectly. I do believe that some of our best leaders have been all over the place in the conservative, liberal sphere. Barack Obama himself had very conservative positions on public education. He believed in some vouchers and some schools, which is considered a conservative issue. I will tell you that in the African American community, there are many issues which they are very conservative on. I do believe, as Sarah alluded to, many times those who would seek your support and your votes, they hide behind those labels because it guarantees them a certain amount of support, but you'd be surprised how they voted and the positions that they took once they were elected. I think that we ought to evaluate the person and see what they stand for. I'm considered a pro-business legislator. Every bill that I vote on, I want to see how many jobs can it create. The reality is, as Sarah mentioned, I think that healing of many of the ills and maladies that affect our community can be corrected if we have economic opportunities. I know this is not a crowd that is into gangster rap here, but the gangster rapper Tupac Shakur said at one time that it feels good to pay the rent when the rent is due. Even he recognizing that there's an importance to economic opportunities. When we talk about poor communities, we're talking about a community that is more ill, as Sarah mentioned. We talk about a poor community, education opportunities are not as great. We talk about poor communities, certainly the crime rate is higher. So if we can create more economic opportunities, we would find that we could address some of the ills that face our communities, which is a conservative principle. So I think we need to throw the labels away, and let's judge those for the principles that they support and that they bring forward.
I agree. I'm going to let Sarah take that charge up, and she's going to get out there and get rid of these labels for us. We're behind you, Sarah. Let's get that done.
And I'm working on it.
We're going to switch now because there is a race that is coming up, the Atlanta mayor race. And I counted about 26 people who've thrown their hat into the race. So what do you guys think about this mayoral race that's coming up? And what can we expect?
I live in Marietta, so I'm an outside observer. I'm not backing any candidate. I would say first and foremost, that many people who want to throw their hat in the ring, that's a win for democracy. I love, if there's a silver lining to the previous presidency, I would say it's the engagement levels for regular folks, people like me. I never thought I was going to run for office with 2 small kids and running a business, but I'm glad I did. And I love watching moms who are fed up, throw in for a school board race or a state legislature seat, or people like Dr. Jasmine Clark or Dr. Rebecca Mitchell, scientists who wanted to see science backing our policy. So I think the number of people who are engaged in that race, the number of people who've put their hat in the ring, is certainly a win from that perspective. And look, it's going to be one of the most closely watched races in the country. I was very fortunate to get to meet and speak a little bit with Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms. Actually, when Barack Obama came here in 2018, when he endorsed Stacey Abrams and I and a number of candidates, we did a rally together and we met privately with the president beforehand. And the mayor was just a true gracious mom. She was a good leader. She was a mom. So I'm sad to see anytime a woman at that level of office takes a pass on running again. I'm sure we haven't seen the last of her in elected office or in public service, but I think this is good for the city to have a real conversation about how you want to move forward. The green energy economy is here, the voting rights, the racial reconciliation that this country's needed for 2 centuries. All of that's arriving at the same time. So who you choose as your leader is going to matter a lot.
It's amazing that Georgia is back in the center of the eyes of the public, from around the world. And it's scary, but it is so exciting as well, because we get to do it right. We get to do it right. So I didn't mean to cut you off, Representative Mitchell. You want to tell us what your thoughts are on this mayoral race?
Well, it's no question. I see Teresa Hardy is online. I saw a comment by her, and Teresa is the president of the most important branch of the NAACP in Georgia, in DeKalb County.
That's my home branch too.
And she said it. What affects Atlanta certainly affects Georgia. It is a city that drives what we tend to believe of, at least metro. When people say they're coming to Atlanta, it could be as far away as Cobb County or Covington. It certainly, but when you talk about the biggest economic generator now in the world, is the Atlanta airport.
Yes.
And that's in the hands of Atlanta leadership. Atlanta has been very, very fortunate in that they've had incredible leadership, from Sam Massell to Maynard Jackson, Shirley Franklin, certainly Keisha Lance Bottoms. Kasim Reed has been a former colleague of mine, and Felicia Moore has been great. Sharon Gay is great. I used to work in the city of Atlanta's law department, and Sharon Gay was there as well. So there's some incredible leadership, and I'm just hoping that continues to be the case. We need strong, good leadership out of Atlanta, because the city influences so much of what we know to be Georgia.
It does. It really does influence. It has a great influence, and that's why I say it's so exciting to see what is happening here in Georgia, and to really kind of be a part of that. I thought it was exciting when the Olympics was here, but this has been these last 2 years with the election of our senators has been one of the most exciting. Other than, I remember when Barack Obama was announced. I remember where I was. I remember the emotion that I felt when that happened. I remember when John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock were announced. I remember where I was, and I remember the emotion. Wow. So it's that type of thing that we're experiencing over and over and over. And I'm hoping that we can continue to experience some good things coming out of Georgia, and some good things coming out of politics. You said before, we talked about the changing of the landscape, you would hope that the changing of the landscape would also mean the changing of the guards. We're not really seeing a lot of that, but hopefully we will see more of that. What would you suggest to someone like to maintain, to really just be encouraged, to just hang in there, to not to give up, and not to say it's useless, or my vote doesn't count. I'm not going to do that, but I have a lot of people that say, oh, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They're still going to win. They're still going to do what they're going to do. But we need to have a elevator conversation that we can spout out that is truth to help someone. So
well, sometimes it's not even just that. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Minister, but sometimes it's just fatigue, right? And we're seeing that the runoff lasted, in 2018, that election for a lot of people never did get fully resolved, because there were voter suppression issues that were not addressed. And then, in fact, the Republicans and the state leadership and the state legislature outright denied to this day, even as they support the big lie, right? And then we went straight into the 2020 cycle, kind of the battle for the soul of our nation, as President Biden called it. And then the runoffs extending into January. and now we're in the mayoral race. So my biggest fear, and that's all before we potentially look at a rematch with Stacey Abrams and Governor Kemp, or some other Democrat and Governor Kemp. And my biggest fear is that people will get fatigued. And so the thing that I would think about is when you watch the evening news, whether it is the number of children in an ICU with COVID because of a lack of leadership at the state level, or whether it is the tragedy we saw unfold in Afghanistan yesterday, where terrorism, unfortunately, extremism, religious extremism, are still very much alive and well around the world, and they still very much have a target aimed squarely at the United States. All of those things happen within the context of who our elected leaders are. Yeah. And so when you feel discouraged, think about the last time your copay was too high and your insurance, or that a family member had to choose between affording the medication they need and rent or food or heat. Think about those things, because it all boils down to how many of us show up. The runoffs in January showed us there are enough people in this state who want to do the right things for the right reasons at the right time to get us the right leaders we deserve. But we have to show up. And so I would think about it when you open those bills, whether it's your electric bill or your healthcare bills. I would think about it when you watch the news. Every single thing you're seeing is happening within the context of the people who make and enforce the laws.
And absolutely. And I will tell you, the last time Sarah ran with Stacey, Stacey lost the gubernatorial race was something like 1.23%, which translated to be about like 54,000 votes. Let me give you a staggering statistic. We had over 50 some odd thousand folks in DeKalb County alone who were unregistered, eligible to vote, but they were unregistered, and had they been registered, they would have most likely voted for Democrats. Just one county. There's 180 counties in Georgia. That's just in one county. However, I believe there's an enthusiasm that is brewing like we have never seen before. This attempt to stymie people getting to the polls and suppress our vote, I think is actually fueling an enthusiasm like we've never seen before. Just saw a report last week where 95% of all eligible people who are eligible to be voted have registered already. 95%. That is incredible. If we could have, and even in the last election cycle when we elected Ossoff and Warnock, would you believe we had a higher turnout in the runoff than we had in the general election, which is unprecedented. I mean, just literally unprecedented. So with that kind of enthusiasm, with those kinds of voter registration numbers, I believe that we're going to see some great things happening in this state and therefore this nation.
I saw where, they're talking about doing another purge of the voters list. And not to be morbid, but my aunt who was living with me was a registered voter. She died on July 31st. Last week, I got a letter saying she has been removed from the roll, that according to her death, she's been removed. And I thought, that's quick. But I was telling someone, but that tells me how serious it is that within a 3 weeks period, they identified that she was dead and removed her. And so, it's going to get down to every vote counts, and everyone needs to be registered, and not only registered, but go out and vote. And so we've got to keep this fire going to say, you got to do this. And I'm wondering if like I said before, Teresa said 185,000 per list. That's a lot. We had those incidents that happened that kind of fueled everything. And I'm wondering, with COVID and now with it being back, that we're rising up again in the numbers, how, how is this going to affect, or is this the new bluebird? And that was a term that we used to use in accounting, that, when it was something phenomenal that happened and, not going to happen again. But is this the new bluebird to get people out to vote, the handling of COVID-19?
It is for me, but I'm a mom with two kids. Billy's met them. He's seen them come up on stage and take the mic away from me in the middle of a campaign event. But, they're 8 and 10. And there is nothing you could have told me 10 years ago before I was a mom that would have made me understand how profoundly that would reshape everything I see in the world. And my kids wear their masks. They have not done as many play dates as I would like them to. We've created a bubble because my grandmother, their great grandmother, they still see a couple times a week. She's teaching them to sew. We do Sunday suppers together. So we're very careful. And also, we all had pretty tough battles with COVID last summer. And I think for me, that reshapes everything. It reshapes when you see people who are not only ignoring the advice of doctors, right? There are dozens and dozens of doctors here in Cobb County who wrote a letter pleading with the Cobb County School District Superintendent Chris Ragsdale to please implement a mask mandate in the schools. We're not asking to mandate vaccines. We're just saying, please have people wear masks, stop the spread. We're ordering a mobile auxiliary morgue for Kennestone Hospital down the road where my youngest was born, and he won't implement a mask mandate. And to see him not only deny the science and the physicians and the will of the community and the parents, but also the Centers for Disease Control, the American Academy of Pediatricians, and the Cobb County and Douglas County Public Health Department. We're at almost 8 times the rate that the CDC considers high transmission. We had 1,026 new positive cases in Cobb County schools last week alone. And they won't implement a mask mandate. So if you want to know if that changes my motivation, heck yeah, it does. I can't wait to support school board candidates and state legislative candidates in my area who will do the right thing to put our kids' well-being before their own personal partisan preferences, politics, and quest for power. That pursuit of power, that's the same as the love of money being the root of all evil in the scripture, right? That is a direct correlation for me. So that's probably the most passionate answer you can get from me right now. But heck yeah, it changes the way I look at this.
Yeah. I saw where the governor has brought in the National Guards to help. And I thought, okay, correct me if I'm wrong, but don't we have to pay extra money out to have them to come and do all of this work, where mask, vaccine would cut down on
healthcare workers, meaning they were working in healthcare somewhere else. And he's bragging about deploying the National Guard when he should have deployed a mask mandate. It would have been cheaper, earlier, more effective. That's what a leader does. He says, I understand the politics, but I got to do the right thing here. Right? And he didn't. Our governor whiffed, guys. This state is in a leadership vacuum. It doesn't matter what your politics are. Objectively, the man has failed to do the right thing time and time again in this pandemic.
Well, I certainly would side on the side of making certain that all our folks wear masks and are vaccinated. I'm so glad just today the Superior Court in Florida overruled the governor of that state, who said that he was not going to allow mask mandates in that state. And the Supreme Court of his state overruled him.
Wow.
You want to see some real leadership in Austria. They have a woman prime minister in Austria. Maybe it's this women thing. Maybe we need more women elected. They have a woman prime minister there, and they have all but eliminated this pandemic in Austria. Now listen to this. They had one case last week. One case. One person came up with the COVID disease. And you know what she did? She shut the whole country down. The whole country down, because she wants this pandemic not at all in her country. And that's leadership.
Yes.
And I think that had we not politicized this from the onset, we probably would be over with this pandemic. And that's, those who say the government should not be telling me to take vaccinations. Well, that's what government does. I mean, you can't start school as a child without being vaccinated. We give you rules to drive, rules on what you can do with your food, your clothes, just about every aspect of your life. There's some rules associated with issued by government. So we should not have politicized it. I think it now has a mind of its own. Even the former president got up last week somewhere and said, you all should get vaccinated. And the monster that he created booed him.
I saw that and I thought, oh gosh, well, that tells you, what can I say? Maybe there's, I'm not going to say maybe there's still hope. I can hope. Well, we are coming to a close, and I want to allow each of you to have some time, at least 2 minutes, to talk about some of the initiatives that you are spearheading in the near future, or if you're doing it now, or within the next year or so. And Sarah, we're going to go with you, and then we'll go to Mr. Mitchell, and then we're going to close out.
Thanks so much, Minister Eva. It's a pleasure to be back on Community Social Justice. And y'all can see why I adore Billy Mitchell so much and why I'm so grateful that he's in the State House. I know he is doing the great work for his community and will continue to do so. So my takeaway would be this conversation was set up as the future of Georgia politics. And the future of Georgia politics is up to y'all. It's up to you. Register to vote, check your registration, show up at the ballot box. And I promise you, the future of this state is bright. It is prosperous. It is broadly prosperous for all of us. But it's up to us. And, for me right now, I'm really focused on, I launched a company, we'll actually be launching our public site here in the next few weeks, but called Rediscovering Our American Dream. I got tired of everybody politicizing this idea of the American dream, but not having real conversations about what it means and why it's not available to everybody, because there are some communities for whom that's always been out of reach, and we need to fix that. So I've spent the last few months doing about 400 interviews around the country, filming them. And we have interviewed people in 40 states and also Americans living abroad, people who moved abroad because they are healthcare refugees. They couldn't afford their medical bills here. We interviewed a family who moved to the Emirates, who felt like their children were safer there, even under Islamic law, than they were dealing with police brutality here. It was a really tough story to hear, but these are immigrants, entrepreneurs, small business owners trying to make it through the pandemic, and community builders, people like Representative Billy Mitchell, who are fighting for their community to expand access to opportunity, to break down the barriers to it. And I hope y'all will check it out. I can't wait to share some of the stories. We interviewed Mayor Van Johnson in Savannah, Charles Booker, a candidate for U.S. Senate in Kentucky, Wendy Davis running against Marjorie Taylor Greene up in Georgia 14, and CEOs from every walk of life that you can imagine. But these stories have moved me to tears time and time again. And you can also share your story. So we're at ouramericandreams.org. It has a video link. You click on a button and you can upload your story about what opportunity means and what you're working on to expand opportunity for your family and your community from your phone or from your laptop. So I'm super excited about this. And our mission is to start those conversations, the ones we talked about earlier, Billy, where we're not having them anymore across communities, but we all want the same things for our kids, right? A better future, more opportunity, safe and secure. So I hope we'll get a chance to talk about it even more after everything is fully launched.
Yes, we're excited about that. And most definitely, you're our favorite panelist to come on, and
it's very mutual.
That's something we'd like to hear about and also get behind to support you. Representative Mitchell, we'll let you have the last words.
Well, very quickly, I tell you, I'm going to join Sarah in her organization. That's my ambition, and she does such great work for sure. I just want to impart with your viewers. There are some people who don't want some people to vote, and I hope that they don't succumb to that and they get out and exercise their vote. If they do, we can make a difference. And that's what I'm going to be working on. It's a shame that we don't have an expansion of Medicaid in this state. The reality is we trumpet ourselves as the number one place to do business is Georgia. And in most respects, that is true. The state will literally give you their checkbook if you wish to expand the business and bring enough jobs to the state. But I will maintain to you that the hospitals are not only some of the greatest economic generators, but the largest employers in many of our communities, particularly in the rural communities, and they are closing down because of the not having the expansion of Medicaid. So that's something that we're working on. I will tell you, we'll have to come back, Minister Eva, and talk about economic opportunities. We have before us the opportunity to have gambling, casino gambling, horse racing, online sports betting. And I'd love to get your opinion and your viewers' opinion on this issue. Certainly, when you talk about those kinds of issues, there is a side that is undesirable. But there's no question about it that there is an economic generator to it. And as one who virtually every time I vote on a bill, I ask myself, how will this create jobs? Will it be good for jobs? And so I'm kind of torn there, and I'm trying to collect as much information as I can from our constituents to see what would be the best way to go. I can give you many anecdotes of how it has certainly benefited the community, but there are anecdotes of where it has been problematic as well. Great to be with you and look forward to talking with you again. And Sarah, it's great to be on the panel with you.
Same to you, Billy.
I want to say thank you so much to each of you for coming on, for both of you for coming in tonight. And we definitely, to our listening and viewing audience, we will definitely have these people, these two very prominent people here in Georgia back on to discuss these initiatives that they are spearheading. It is so important to our community that we find those who are doing great work and then get behind that. It's important that we support excellence. And I can say that from Community Social Justice Atlanta, we found these two individuals, we vetted them to be workers of excellence. And that's what we desire to bring to you. Tune in again. We'll be back, and this is our last broadcast for August. In September, we're going to be bringing you some more information about the schools. Are they ready? And then in October, we'll be talking about its mental health. And so we're going to be talking about our mental health. But for now, I also want to say that we're going to be issuing a prayer up for those that are in Afghanistan, that our prayers are with those, especially those families and those military people, families who lost their lives. We pray that God will protect and that God will comfort those as well. Until we see you again, goodbye from Community Social Justice Atlanta. Have a great weekend.